Please be seated. The Commission sits today in concurrent hearings. I will conduct the hearing in this room. The proceedings will be recorded and a transcript prepared of the evidence. Each of the other commissioners will have the opportunity to listen to and or read the evidence that is given in this hearing room. We sit today to hear the evidence of Mr. Duckworth. Mr. Duckworth, could you please come forward? Mr. Duckworth, would you mind remaining standing? Could you please state your full name for the record?
Andrew Martin Edward Duckworth.
Thank you, Mr. Duckworth. Do you want to take the oath or the affirmation?
Affirmation, thank you.
Could you please read that out aloud?
I, Andrew Martin Edward Duckworth, sincerely declare and affirm that the evidence that I give to this Commission shall be the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Thank you, Mr. Duckworth. Please take your seat. Yes, Mr. Sadler.
Thank you, Commissioner. Mr. Duckworth, you were summoned to appear before the Perth Royal Commission today?
Yes.
The Crown Casino Royal Commission. And the Commission provided a list of topics that we covered during your examination?
Yes.
And the Commission invited you to prepare a second written statement in relation to those topics?
Yes.
And do you have a copy of that second witness statement which you prepared?
I do.
And have you read the contents of that statement?
Yes.
And are the contents correct, true and correct to the best of your knowledge and belief?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Duckworth. Commissioner, I tender the second witness statement of Andrew Martin Edward Duckworth, dated 27 August 2021, which has the number GWC 0003.0015.0001.
Thank you, Mr. Sadler. The second witness statement of Mr. Duckworth bearing that number will be an exhibit in the proceedings. Thank you. Yes, Ms. Spencer.
May it please the Commission. Mr. Duckworth,
Sorry, long drop it. I don't know why I thought that it was Ms. Spencer this morning. I apologise for that. Ms. Longdroppet.
Thank you, Commissioner. Mr. Duckworth, my name is Ms. Longdroppet. I'll be asking you some questions this morning. You just tendered a witness statement, which is the second statement that you've given to the Commission. Is that correct?
Yep.
And you also gave oral evidence in May.
Yes.
Is that correct? And Mr. Futrell, do you recall, asked you questions about some of the topics that you've also been asked about in your statement, in your
Yes.
second statement. So I hope to not traverse over old ground, but there are some elements of your statement which I will ask you to expand on or for clarification.
Yes.
And I must also preface this examination by saying that at times I will refer to the oral evidence that you gave in the May examination. And we do have transcript references for that if you would like me to bring up the transcript in respect of any of that evidence. But,
Okay.
but I don't propose to do so as a matter of course for the sake of expediency.
Okay.
You were asked, so on to the first topic, you were asked in your witness summons to provide evidence in relation to the adequacy of briefings or oral briefings by the department as to the budget formulated by the department for the Commission. Topic 2.
Yes.
And also in respect of the service fee charged by the department. And I just want to clarify the effect of your evidence at paragraphs 9 and 10 of your witness statement is that, in your view, those briefings were adequate, but you're not the best person to ask about this because accounting is outside of your area of expertise.
Yes.
And am I right in thinking that you did not turn your mind specifically to the calculation of the department's service fee for the same reason, because it was outside of your area of expertise?
Yes.
And I note you've said in paragraph 9 that the GWC has recently benefited from having two accountants on the board who probed the department's finances better than you could.
Yes.
And here you're referring specifically to Ms. Meadows and Ms. Fiorentino.
Yep.
Is that correct?
Yes.
And you're aware that both of those individuals commenced their appointment on the GWC board in August of 2018?
Yes.
My question then is, between 2008, when you commenced on the GWC board, and August 2018, can you recall if yourself or anyone else on the GWC board took it upon themselves to scrutinise the budget presented to the Commission by the department?
Yes, I can. In particular, Mr. Sargent, who had, before entering the gaming arena, I believe, had experience in treasury and finance and had some sort of financial background. But other members from time to time ask specific questions about the accounts, yeah.
And Mr. Sargent was also a member of the department at the time. He was a member of the...
Yes.
And do you recall he himself was involved in the preparation of the budget?
He would have had a part in overseeing the preparation, I think, yes.
And in respect of that particular scrutiny, it was only when there was an odd figure or a discrepancy that was looked at in one of the budget line items.
I can't say for sure that's the only time, but those are the occasions that I remember.
I'm just going to take you to a specific example in respect of the calculation of the service fee to get your views on it.
Yep.
This is in respect of the 2009-2010 budget tabled by Mr. Sargent. If you could bring up GWC.0007.0011.0043 at page 497, please. I think we're just having a delay here. Mr. Duckworth, apologies.
That's all right.
I've just been informed that Lexel, the technical support, is having difficulties at their end in relation to bringing up this document. Hopefully they'll be able to fix that. I see now that they have been able to bring it up.
Good.
If we could go to page 497, please. And you'll see that this is agenda item 9.2.
Mm-hmm.
And if you scroll down, and this is a memorandum prepared by Mr. Sargent. Do you recall seeing this?
Well, it's 11 years ago. I can't precisely say that I do, but I'll study the transcript here.
Thank you. And the part that I'm most interested in, Mr. Duckworth, is under the heading in relation to the operating expenses, which is now at the moment at the very bottom of your screen. If I could ask them to scroll up, and the second dot point underneath that heading.
Hang on, recouping.
It says recruitment for services received from RGL has increased by $771,344.
Yeah.
Oh, we've lost it again.
Yes, it was obscured by the boxes at the bottom of the screen. Oh yeah.
It's still obscured. Yes. Okay.
No, it's fine.
Thank you.
Fine.
So the second dot point under operating expenses, recruitment for services received from RGL has increased by $771,344 due to a review of fees and charges exercise undertaken by RGL. This figure is now the true indication of costs and services provided by the department. Do you recall reading, you said just to confirm, you don't have any specific recollection of reading this document at the time?
I haven't any specific recollection now. I'm pretty sure I would have read it at the time.
Thank you. And if we now please go to page 500, which is part of the budget itself and not the explanation of it. And you'll see under the heading operating expenses, the fourth line item, relating to recruitment for services received from DRGL. Do you see that there, Mr. Duckworth?
Yes, I see that.
And you'll see that under the column estimated actual for 2008 to 2009, there is a services fee of $3,187,271.
Yes, I see that.
And then the annual budget amount of $3,958,615.
Yeah.
And I don't expect you to do this mathematics here and now, but can you take it from me, please, that the difference between those numbers is the $771,344?
Yes, for sure.
Yeah. And I'm also no accountant, Mr. Duckworth, but by my back of the envelope calculation, that is an increase of around 25%. Do you agree with that?
I'm sure you're right.
And you accept that is quite a substantial increase from one financial year to the next?
Yes, it is.
And do you recall any discussion about this increase at the time?
No, I don't.
And you don't recall any specific explanation from Mr. Sargent as to this increase?
The only thing I can think is that it needed to better reflect the actual cost of service, I suppose. But other than that, I'm imagining that. I don't really know, or I'm surmising, I should say, not imagining.
And in relation to it being a true reflection of the services rendered, was there any cause for inquiry in relation to what was budgeted for in the annual budget of 2008-09, which was $3,345,103, and the estimated actual cost came under the annual budget for that year?
I can't recall, and I'd have to add that I think this was the very beginning of my tenure on the Commission, and there's a bit of a learning curve going on.
Thank you, Mr. Duckworth. Just to wrap this topic up, during your time on the GWC, was it the usual practice for the board to ask for a specific breakdown of how the service fee was being spent by the department in a financial year?
I don't recall that, no.
You don't have a specific recollection of it being asked?
No, I don't. I imagine the fee generally had a CPI component, and certainly if there was something extra happening in a particular year, for example, if WA was hosting a gaming regulators conference, there would have been extra expenditure attached to that, to providing the services for that. So my recollection is that CPI plus any additional or unusual or services which didn't perform part of the normal year.
And on reflection, during your tenure on the GWC, do you consider that the scrutiny and review of the budget by the GWC was adequate?
It's difficult to comment on that because there was a fair bit of discussion, as I say, by those people who had more of a bent for figures than I did. So it's difficult for me to gauge what was adequate and what wasn't adequate.
And is that also your view in respect of how the department calculated its service fee?
Sorry, what was my
Was
view?
there adequate scrutiny of how by the GWC of how the department calculated its service fee?
With hindsight, no, but at the time I considered it would have been adequate.
Thank you, Mr. Duckworth. Now, in paragraph 11 of your statement, you say that even though the department prepared the GWC's budget, the GWC reviewed and approved its own finances. Was it your understanding that if the GWC needed additional resources to perform its regulatory functions, that it could amend the budget presented to it by the department or otherwise obtain access to additional funds?
I can't say I gave that any thought, but I assume that had there been something that came up that was unusual or unexpected, that would have been the case.
So if we think of a specific example, the effect of your evidence in the May examination was that in 2010, when the GWC made the decision to remove the requirement that junket operators be approved by GWC, one of the reasons was you didn't feel as though the board was adequately resourced to successfully vet junket operators.
Well, certainly resourced in terms of skills, I think, but also money, yeah.
And taking that example and what you've told me about your understanding of how the GWC could have theoretically asked for more funding, it would have been possible in 2010 had the GWC turned its mind to it.
If it had turned its mind to that, it would have been possible, I guess, yes.
Either through the GWC itself or through departmental
That's right,
support.
yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Duckworth. I just want to move on to the next topic, which is in respect of delegations. In the course of giving evidence in May, you were asked quite extensively by Mr. Futrell about your understanding of the way delegations to the department or the chief casino officer worked. And you have again been asked to respond to questions about delegations.
Yeah.
So I guess this is prefaced by we're labouring the point a little bit, but I do want to seek clarification in some areas. You've said at paragraph 13 of your witness statement that the GWC's intention in delegating its powers was to expedite the implementation of straightforward or routine matters.
Yes.
And can you explain, please, to the Commission what you understand to be straightforward, at the time you were on the GWC board, what you understood to be straightforward or routine matters?
Okay. Now, in relation to community gaming, that would be the vetting, approving of community gaming nights or poker tournaments or that sort of thing, according to criteria that had already been preset and agreed by the Commission. At one stage, a great deal of time was spent looking at whether various clubs and so forth could have poker tournaments and so on. So it was decided, well, the best thing is to come up with a policy and a way of how that will be implemented and delegate that to officers who can then deal directly with the people who make these requests, make sure that everything's done as it should be, and then expedite the approval. So that's in the community gaming area. As far as the casino is concerned, might be that after there had been some discussion about rule changes to games, or it had arisen, that the final entering into the WA Appendix Casino Manual would be done under delegation by, say, the Chief Casino Officer.
So in respect of the casino, you understood that straightforward and routine matters extended to rule changes to games only?
Well, no, not only. I'm giving that as an example, and other examples don't come to mind. But these things are often discussed beforehand, and the final implementation of making the change would be perhaps done under delegation.
And when you say discussed beforehand, do you mean at GWC
Yes.
meetings?
Yes.
So that discussion would have been recorded in the minutes of those meetings?
I think it would in some cases. Or should in all cases, I guess.
Right. And there's a tension here between what you describe as straightforward or routine matters and what you describe in paragraph 14 of your statement, that the power of delegation was at least in theory unfettered.
Yes.
Can you describe to me what you mean by in theory unfettered? Or sorry,
Oh, in 14 here, it just says it was
Understood, sorry.
that the power was unfettered.
Sorry, and the part where I see that it operated by convention in a different way, that it was fettered. Is that your evidence, the effect of your evidence at paragraph 14?
No, I mean, under the changes that were made by the Commission to delegate powers except the power of delegation, then it wouldn't be it would be unfettered in the strict sense of that happening. But there was certainly a lot of discussion about various issues. As I say, there was a strong degree of trust within the Commission and between the Commission and the Department that there would be, that no one would abuse that power.
Thank you, Mr. Duckworth. And in relation then to who was ultimately responsible for exercising the value judgment as to whether something was straightforward or routine, or something that was exceptional and requiring discussion at GWC level, am I right in thinking that that decision lay with the relevant departmental officer or the chief casino officer in the exercise of the power?
Well, the GWC would discuss these issues, and members themselves might say, "Well, I think we need to look at this more," or "This isn't as straightforward as it seems." I mean, it wasn't all a case of, well, we'll leave it to someone else to do. But as to what was straightforward and what was not straightforward, I suppose there's always a demarcation.
And that demarcation at decision level was made by the relevant departmental officer or the chief casino officer?
Yes, on occasions I think it was, yes.
And in respect of that demarcation, there was no relevant guiding policy that had been developed by the GWC in relation to what was a straightforward or routine decision and what wasn't?
There were policies, yes, which should guide those decisions. For example, the well-known one about electronic gaming machines, both from a point of view of timing, of design, of whether they resemble poker machines and so forth. That was sort of written in stone that someone couldn't go against that and delegate something different to that. So that's one example.
Right, so in respect of any decisions in relation to the EGM policy, it was your understanding that that wouldn't be made without first bringing the decision to the GWC for consideration?
Could not.
And there may be other examples, but what I'm getting at, Mr. Duckworth, is that there was no overarching guide for the decision maker in relation to what should and shouldn't be exercised under delegated power.
No.
I just want to ask you about approvals that had been made under delegation. So these, just to clarify, these are decisions that have been made without prior consultation to the GWC board. Those are the matters about which I'm asking questions.
Yes.
What was your usual practice of review in relation to those approvals?
Sorry, can you ask the question again?
Sure, sorry. It's my understanding that when an approval was exercised under delegation, that was then presented to the GWC in a table and tabled at the following GWC board meeting.
That's right.
That's correct?
Yes.
And what was your usual practice or the board's usual practice during your time on the GWC in relation to those approvals?
Well, people would look at them. On occasion there'd be questions, but very often there would not be any questions in regard to that.
So you might not agree with this proposition, but I put it to you for comment that when a departmental officer or the chief casino officer had made a decision that an approval was routine and didn't require pre-approval or discussion at GWC level, that the approval itself was not then in practice subject to any further scrutiny by the GWC.
In practice, that's probably correct.
Thank you, Mr. Duckworth. Now I want to move on to another topic. Topic 4, the media allegations.
Yeah.
I know Mr. Futrell asked you questions about certain allegations raised in the media against against Crown. I'll do my best to differentiate between Crown Perth and Crown Melbourne in this section.
Yeah.
Because I know that's a relevant distinction.
Yes.
And Mr. Futrell asked you about, do you recall him asking you about the 2014 ABC Four Corners program, High Rollers, High Risk?
Sorry, I'm a bit behind you here.
That's okay. This might not, Ms. Duckworth, it might not appear specifically in your statement. I'm just asking you if you might recall.
Well, it does appear at paragraph 16, it seems.
Oh, yeah.
I beg your pardon, yes. You were asked to respond in relation
Yes.
to this allegation as well in your statement.
Yep.
But I'm just trying to, I guess, confirm your understanding in relation to the GWC's response to these particular allegations.
Yes, having refreshed my memory by looking at documents, I recall that Mr. Connolly wrote a report in which he basically explained the reason why not just Crown but all casinos pursue international people, wealthy international people. And in that report he put a sentence which said that the GWC doesn't any longer or doesn't have a role in vetting these people or the money that they spend at the casino.
And that is as at 2014?
Yes, I believe so, yes.
Right, and Mr. Futrell also asked you, and it's also been asked of you again in your second witness summons about media reports about Crown employees being arrested in China in October 2016.
Yeah, yes, I remember that. Yep.
And Mr. Futrell also asked you about allegations of money laundering and criminal infiltration made during the 60 Minutes program Crown Unmasked in July 2019.
Yes.
And I don't know if you recall, Mr. Duckworth, but at the end of your examination in May, Commissioner Owen attempted to summarise the approach that was taken by GWC in respect of each of those allegations. And he said, in relation to those allegations, in relation to each of those occasions, the conclusion of the GWC was what he described as a wait-and-see approach. Do you recall that?
Yes, I recall that phrase, yeah.
And you confirmed that?
Yes.
And is that still your understanding, now having refreshed your memory in relation to the documents?
Yes, it was wait and see what comes out of other reports, i.e. For one of these cases, VCGLR in Melbourne, and there was the ILGA report as well started. So I think particularly for the ILGA, the rationale was, well, it's going to be fairly all-encompassing, so if we cooperate with them rather than start our own, I think that was the logic at the time.
Thank you, Mr. Duckworth. Now, I don't want to go over ground that's already been traversed, but this period sparked my interest in relation to what I've just been asking you about in terms of delegations. So I just want to ask you a couple of questions in respect of the period, the intervening period between when the Commission became aware of the China arrests in 2016, in October 2016, and when Crown actually presented to the GWC, which wasn't until August 2017. Do you recall that?
y-
Sorry, first of all, Mr. Duckworth, I should take you one step back.
right.
Is October 26, 2016 around the time you first became aware of the China arrest allegations?
Well, it would have been whenever it was in the general media. So if that was that time, that would have been the time, yeah.
Thank you. And do you recall it actually was discussed at a meeting of the GWC in
Yep.
around October
Yes.
2016?
Yeah.
And if we could please get up the minutes for that particular meeting, GWC.0002.0016.0194 at page 4. Okay. So there's a slight delay because the technical operator can't actually hear me.
Okay.
So my junior is typing to him, which is the cause of the delay. So hopefully we'll be able to get that up shortly. Yeah. Thank you. And bottom of the page.
Let's have a look.
Under general business, the chairman advised that he was unable to provide any additional information on the detention of Crown employees in China than what is currently available in the media. If further information becomes available, the chairman will circulate this to members.
Yeah.
Do you recall anything about that discussion?
No, I really don't, I'm afraid.
Thank you. And you were asked about the initial, when GWC initially became aware of these allegations in your May examination, and your response was that that GWC thought the initial response should have been to get someone from Crown to come as quickly as they could to give us a briefing on what that was all about.
Yes.
Do you agree with that?
Yeah.
Now, I'm not at all being critical of this statement, Mr. Duckworth, because it was a long time ago and I don't think you were being referred to any documents at that particular time. But are you now aware that the briefing by Crown on these arrests didn't occur until August of 2017?
Well, evidently, yeah.
And do you recall any particular reason for the delay?
No, I think there was several requests made, but it didn't finally appear till then.
And given the seriousness of the allegations, did you consider this at the time to be too long of a period for the GWC to wait for this briefing?
Yes. However, there was some discussion about there was a concurrent investigation or request for information going on at Crown Melbourne, I think. And again, that was referenced as somewhere that might be useful to inform us. But I do regard it as too long, yeah, for sure.
Thank you, Mr. Duckworth. And so there's this intervening period between October 2016 and August 2017 when the GWC is waiting for the briefing from Crown. And in this period, is it fair to characterise the GWC as adopting a wait-and-see approach to any action it might take in respect of the oversight of junkets at Crown Perth?
I suppose so. With the arrests in China, there was a strong, and it was thought to be a reasonable assumption, a strong feeling that it was a sort of some kind of exercise in Chinese politics that we didn't fully understand. But the reason for that thought was that there had been people in other walks of life who'd been arbitrarily arrested or imprisoned by the Chinese government, a businessman, I remember, and as I think journalists or whatever. So there was a feeling it might be just a show of strength, to show, as far as China was concerned. That was at least in part a plausible explanation.
Right. But just getting back to my question, before GWC received its briefing in August 2017, the GWC's approach to junket oversight at Crown Perth was a wait-and-see approach.
Yes.
And it is also the case that during this intervening period, the department commenced a regulatory compliance review, which was to include a review into junket operations.
Yes.
And this review was first reported to the GWC in February of 2017.
I'm sure that's right, yep.
Right, and I understand in your statement you say that that review reported back to the GWC in September and November of 2017. It's paragraph
Sorry, which in my
33
statement?
of your statement.
All right, okay. 3. Yes.
Right, and you were aware at the time that this compliance review was instigated on the back of a report released by the Victorian Office of the Auditor General?
Yes, I think so.
And that report had in part found deficiencies in the way the Victorian regulator was monitoring AML and junkets.
Yep.
So, and it was your understanding that at the time the compliance review was commenced in February 2017, it was to include a review of the oversight of junket operations
Yes.
at Crown Perth.
Yes, it clearly stated that.
So I just want to recap. So I just want to bear these contextual matters in mind when I ask you some questions about a change to junket policy during the intervening period, which is the period I'm describing as October 2016 to August 2017.
Yep.
In the May examinations, your evidence was to the effect that after the 2010 amendments to the regulations, the Commission had no role to play in the oversight of junkets. Is that correct?
Something like that, yes, I'm sure.
And relied on other authorities such as AUSTRAC and the Department of Immigration to monitor junket operators and the related AML risk. And was it also the case that you understood that the casino, Crown Perth, had processes for following up on backgrounds and accounts of junket operators?
Yes, and responsibilities to report to AUSTRAC.
And did you understand that those processes, outside of the ones that were prescribed by legislation, were governed by the casino manual?
Yes.
And this was your understanding at the time of approving the amendment to the regulations to remove GWC oversight of junket operations in 2010?
Yes.
Right.
I think so. That's, a long time ago. I'd have to look at the paper again, but yes.
Now, I just want to bring up the GWC minutes for the May 2017 meeting of GWC, please. It's GWC.0002.0016.0222 at page 93. Go and down a little bit further so you can see the table, the delegation. Oh. Thank you. Thank you for your patience, Mr. Doctor.
Okay.
And so do you recognise this as a table of approvals made under delegation,
Yes.
and that table identifies delegations exercised by the Chief Casino Officer, who at the time was Mr. Connolly?
Yes.
And this formed part of your May 2017 board pack. Do you recall that at all?
I don't now, no, I don't.
No specific recollection. You'll see there, Mr. Duckworth, the second row of that table states that there was an amendment to the casino manual operations in relation to international interstate gaming business. On the bottom, the table which
Yeah,
identifies
there's
delegation.
3 dates there. Oh, well, they're all the same date, but
Yep.
divided into 3. Which one am I looking at?
The second one.
Second
Sorry,
one.
Mr.
Okay,
Duckworth.
that's all right.
The date is 11 April 2017, which is the date on which the approval, do you recognise that as the date on which the approval was exercised under delegation?
Well, if it says so here, that is indeed the date, yes.
And then the amendment is to Casino Manual Operations, which is the relevant document. Do you recognise that?
Main bank being phased out. I can't see a reference to the. What am I looking at? Yeah, I understand the middle matter. Yeah,
Yes.
the new section 19, international interstate gaming business. Yeah.
And you understand that to be an amendment to the Casino Manual?
Yes.
And
Sure.
under details, it says new section 19 international interstate gaming business inserted as a result of removing content
Yeah.
in relation to junket program,
Yeah.
gaming incentive program and foreign currency program from the account and control policies and procedures.
Yes, I can see that.
And then section 03A main bank gradually being phased out. And then the requirement for junket operators to be approved by GWC has been removed in line with regulations that were previously amended in 2010. Do you see
Yeah,
that?
I see that. Yes.
And so this is an amendment to the Casino Manual made in April 2017 in relation to oversight of junket operators.
Yeah.
And in the third row, also an approval exercised on 11 April 2017, this time to the, do you recognise that to be an amendment to the accounting and internal control policies and procedures?
Yes.
And the details are content in relation to junket program, gaming incentive program and foreign currency program deleted.
Yes.
And so you understand that by reference to the details to be an amendment to the accounting and internal control policies as it might relate to junket programs.
Yes.
Right. And you don't have any specific recollection of reading this document, but it would have been your usual practice to read this document before the meeting.
Yes, it would have been, yes.
Now, can I please take you to the minutes of that May 2017 meeting, GWC.0002.0016.0220 at page 4. And you'll note at agenda item 11.2, it was resolved to note the approvals issued under delegation.
Yes.
So do you take that note to mean that there was no further scrutiny of the approvals at the meeting of the GWC on May 2017?
Not as I recall, no.
Now, I want to ask you this, Mr. Duckworth, in the context of those amendments being made in relation to junkets, in a period where the Commission was waiting for a briefing from Crown Perth as to the China arrests,
Yes.
and the outcome of a compliance review, including as to junkets, can you explain why members of the GWC did not interrogate those approvals further in the May 2017 meeting?
No, except that it may have been seen as a final, if you like, tidy up of what was effectively carried out in 2010. I think that's the way I saw it, that it was just finally amending all that. But otherwise, no, I can't explain why it wouldn't have been discussed.
And beyond the description of the amendments contained in that table under the column details, the Commission didn't have any further information as to what those amendments actually were. Now, if we could please bring up GWC.0004. Sorry, I'm just being handed a note. Subject to a... Okay, so we won't go to page 1. Yeah. This document is subject to a claim for privilege, but I'm not proposing to go to a page over which that claim is made. This is GWC.0004.0008.0005 at page 5. So if the operator can please not go to page 1. Right. And you'll see that the proposed amendment that was approved under delegation under clause 16.2 was the deletion of the requirement that once approved, that the Gaming and Wagering Commission might give clearance for approved junket operators prior to this amendment being made. Do you see that?
The struck out part,
Yes.
that was what originally was the case, yeah.
Originally was the case. And it was actually still a power that the GWC had until 2017. Let me rephrase that. This was still an obligation that the casino had placed upon itself through its casino manual.
Yeah.
Prior to this amendment being made in 2017.
Yes.
And you would agree that the deletion of this requirement that the casino had put on itself had the effect of diluting further the responsibilities that Crown Perth had in relation to junket operators.
Assuredly, yes.
Now, I want you to bear in mind the way that, and what I'd like to do by way of illustration is to show you what Crown Perth thought was being approved in relation to this deletion. If we can bring up GWC.0004.0014.0002, which is not in the book for some reason. Okay. I will perhaps have to come back to that illustration. But So, Mr. Duckworth, in circumstances where you agree that this amendment in fact had the effect of diluting the responsibilities of Crown Perth in relation to junket operators, is it your view now that had the Commission inquired further as to the effect of the amendment at the May 2017 meeting, it was at least possible that it might have revisited its role in respect of providing clearance of junket operators at that time?
Yes, but as I say, I understood that the Commission had relinquished its role in vetting or approving junket operators back in 2010.
But you do agree that a further inquiry in the context of the China arrests and the compliance review and waiting for Crown's briefing might have given rise to a different outcome in relation to the exercise of this delegation in April 2017?
Well, I suppose I assume that that power is no longer there because of what had happened in 2010.
And that assumption... Right. I withdraw that.
Okay.
In circumstances where we are in what I've called the intervening period and GWC has adopted a wait-and-see approach, do you consider that it was incumbent upon the Commission to inquire in relation to any proposed amendments to the casino manual or other Crown Perth policies relating to junkets during that period?
Well, I suppose that was part of the wait and see. You know, are there things that we ought to do if and when we find out more of the processes that have been taking place? Sitting here now, of course, we should have done more. But at the time, there was a very strong feeling of, look, there's a couple of inquiries going on. And I think the feeling that it wouldn't make a great deal of, this is my own interpretation, I hasten to add, wouldn't make a great deal of difference if we waited a month or two in terms of probing the problem in the most efficient way, if we waited to see the sorts of things that were happening in other places.
Right, and that's
Plus the fact that as far as I recall, the ILGA investigation did sort of reach out to other jurisdictions and say, look, if you can contribute to our inquiry, we would welcome it.
And that was in respect of anything that the GWC might proactively do in relation to oversight of junkets at Crown Perth, correct?
Yes, that at least, but I took it as being broader than that too.
You took it as being a wait-and-see approach that Crown Perth was taking in relation to its own regulation of its responsibilities in relation to junket operators.
I'm not quite with you there, but just to go back one, it is true that we took a wait-and-see approach.
Right. And so, in relation to this amendment, which occurred during that intervening period, this was an amendment that occurred in relation to junket operations and would not be consistent with adopting a wait-and-see approach.
Oh, sorry, I've got something entirely different on the screen.
I'll bring you to that in a minute, Mr.
No, okay. No, I think all the discussion, the Commission endorsed the wait-and-see.
Yes, but do you agree that this particular amendment to the Casino Operations Manual was inconsistent with adopting a wait-and-see approach?
Yes.
Thank you. Is that a convenient time, Commissioner?
Yes, certainly.
Oh, actually, sorry, if I do, I can just finish this topic off. I've got about 5 more minutes.
Yeah,
Sorry.
we started a bit late, so later.
We can bring that document down now. I've taken you to paragraph 33 of your statement in relation to the compliance review that was being undertaken and commenced in February 2017.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to ask you about the last sentence of that paragraph, and you say that you don't know why this activity, and you're referring to junket operations, was not included in the review.
Yeah.
Do you recall any inquiries being made by the Commission of the Department at the time the review was handed down in respect of the omission of junket operations in this review?
Not specifically. Often things took quite a while to emerge, reports of various sorts. It wasn't uncommon for the Commission to say, defer to the next month, or matters to be actioned, put it back for 2 or 3 months. So I suppose the fact that it wasn't there struck me as that it might be being done, but it's just taking a lot longer than they thought. But I can't be sure of that. But
yes,
in the context of the way the Commission worked, that's a plausible thing to think.
But in your remaining time on the Commission, that part of the review was never tabled.
Never tabled, no.
Now, the final thing I just want to draw your attention to in relation to the junket policy change in 2017 is in relation to some emails that some correspondence that AUSTRAC sent to Mr. Connolly, which you won't have seen before, and you've said so in your statement. But I just want to draw your attention to them and get your views on them. Could we please bring up GWC.0004.0019.0026, which is subject to a non-publication order. So if the operator could please not display this document on the public screen. And if we could go to page 3. Now, in circumstances where you haven't seen this email before, I'll just give you a moment to have a quick read of it,
Yep.
Mr. Duckworth.
Yes, I've read that. Yeah.
Thank you. And so you understand that this is an email that was sent from Sarah Webster, a Senior Compliance Officer at AUSTRAC, to
Yes.
Mr. Connolly,
Yep.
and it was sent on the 8th of March 2017.
Yes.
And do you agree that the effect of this email is that as at March... Okay. Both names. Okay. Right. Sorry, I've been asked not to publicly identify the AUSTRAC member.
So
Okay.
I'll make a non-publication order that the name of the author and any other AUSTRAC officer identified in today's hearing must be published outside of this courtroom, as well as anything that may identify that person.
My apologies, Commissioner. So back to my question, do you agree that the effect of this email is that as at 8 March 2017, AUSTRAC considered that that GWC did have a role to play in relation to oversight of junket operators?
Absolutely, yeah.
And this communication wasn't brought to your attention by
No.
Mr. Connolly?
No.
Okay, we'll bring up the next correspondence, and please, operator, if you could make sure that no identifying information in relation to that correspondence is shown on, sorry, it's not going to be published on the public screen because it's an MPO, and I won't make reference to the author of that email, but it's GW of this correspondence, but it's gwc.0004.0019.0027. And just make sure the author, please, is not identified when you scroll down to show the rest of the correspondence. That's fine. I can see that you're taking the time to read the correspondence, Mr. Duckworth. Just let me know when you have.
Yep, sure. Okay. Yes, I get the gist of that. Yep.
And you also agree in relation to this correspondence, around a month later, that AUSTRAC considered that GWC did have a role to play in respect of junket
It did.
oversight. And that assumption was at odds with your understanding as at April 2017 of the GWC's role in relation to junket oversight at Crown Perth.
Yes, what was written by Mr. Connolly at that date doesn't tally at all with this. I mean, yeah, the two are at odds.
And you would expect these two pieces of correspondence to have been brought to the attention of GWC. Had it been, do you think GWC might have reconsidered its position as to the oversight of junket operations at Crown Perth?
Yes, yes, it would have been a big wake-up call from the wait and see, that's for sure.
And do you consider that had this correspondence been brought to the GWC's attention that it might have had pause to inquire further into the amendments to the casino manual in relation to junket operations in April 2017?
Yes, I think so. I think it would have been an all-encompassing effort, change of heart from the wait and see, for sure.
Thank you, Mr. Duckworth. Thank you, Commissioner. That's the end of that topic, if that's a convenient time.
Mr. Duckworth, we'll now have morning tea. If you would like to leave, and we'll resume again in 15 minutes at 25 minutes past 11.
Okay.
Thank you. The hearing will adjourn till 25 minutes past 11. All rise. Yes, Ms Longdroppett.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Mr Duckworth.
Yep.
We're on to a new topic, Mr Duckworth.
Yes?
The topic of harm minimisation.
Yep.
At paragraph 40 of your witness statement, you say that you understand that the GWC has a role to play in minimising the harm caused by gambling in the community.
Yeah.
And is this an understanding that you held during your time on the board of GWC?
Very much.
And would you say that, do you agree though that the obligation on the GWC is at the time you were on it slightly more specific than that?
Well, it was part of its charter to minimise community harm from gambling.
And do you agree that that was something that it had to take into account in making and implementing policy?
Yes, yes.
Including as to the operations at Crown Perth?
Yes.
You've been asked in your witness statement about the circumstances in which the GWC would commission expert reports.
Yes.
And you state in your statement that you recall 2 occasions the GWC would commission an expert report. Firstly, in the certification of EGMs.
Yeah.
And am I right in understanding that that is where an EGM was sent off to ensure that it was compliant with the WA appendix?
Yes, it would have been, yeah.
And the second circumstance, and that those reports would be commissioned at regular intervals when an EGM was brought to the GWC for approval?
Yes, yes. They had to be certified before they were put in use.
And the other occasion is when you commissioned the Risk West report before you finished your tenure.
Yes, that was in the final month or 2 of my tenure, but I recall at a meeting a reference to employing Risk West to assist with the risk management review.
And just to confirm, those are the only 2 occasions that you recall when the GWC did or would have commissioned expert reports?
Yes.
And so, to confirm, I'll just put these to you in a row. I suspect I know the answer based on this blanket answer that you've given in relation to expert reports, but just to confirm, the GWC never commissioned any independent research into problem gambling prevalence at Perth Casino?
No, it did draw on Australian, what's it called? The Australian Centre for Gambling Research, I think it's called, reports occasionally.
Right, I'll come back to that in a second,
Yeah.
but in respect of commissioning any independent expert research, it didn't commission any independent expert research into problem gambling prevalence in Western Australia or
No.
the Perth.
There were national surveys that compared states and sort of developed indices of harm and so on. Actually, I remember seeing one dated 2000 and maybe one more after that. WA was always a bit complacent because without poker machines in pubs and clubs, gambling problems as a percentage of population were always a lot lower. But sorry, that's an aside, it's not really.
That's okay. I'll come back to test that proposition in a little while, but
Yeah.
if we could just go through these particular propositions, and I'll come back to your understanding of prevalence of gambling harm in Western Australia at a later point and the research to which you're referring. So it never sought, the GWC in your time on the GWC never sought the input of an expert to address the GWC in relation to gambling addiction.
No.
And it never sought the opinion of an expert in relation specifically to the addictiveness of EGMs.
No.
And you say that you are generally aware of the Australian Gambling Research Centre, and you've referred to that this morning. Do you recall any specific studies or reports you relied upon from the Gambling Research Centre during your time on the Commission?
No, I've read them for just general background knowledge and interest rather than a specific relation to Crown Perth or, yeah.
And that was as part of your independent research in your own time?
Hmm.
And so you would be aware that the last report that was published by the GRA was in 2016?
I wasn't aware of that, but yeah.
And do you think then, in light of the failure by the GWC to request input or to commission independent research into the prevalence of gambling in Western Australia or at the Perth Casino, that you didn't have a proper understanding of that issue as it related to Perth Casino during your time on the Commission?
How can I answer that? I think an expert research project would have refined and enhanced an understanding, but I think everybody had a layperson's or a general understanding of the fact that the business we were regulating could be extremely harmful to a lot of people. And I don't know, I'm speculating here, I don't know whether an expert academic report would have directed us in any other new direction particularly. I mean, it's almost, if I can make an analogy, everybody knows that cigarettes do you harm. I don't know the minute physiological details of that, but I know they do. Most people know that EGMs or poker machines or whatever can be very harmful to a sector of the population. And beyond that, we didn't seek any extra validation, if you like.
Right, so taking that analogy, do you expect that, say, the Department of Health, in making the decision to have green packaging on cigarettes, would have had the input of experts in relation to the effectiveness of that policy?
Yes, of course. Yes, of course.
So I'll take you back to some specific policies later, but to summarise your evidence, you say that you had a layperson's understanding that the product of gambling provided by the Perth Casino could be extremely harmful.
Yep.
But the GWC didn't commission any particular expert reports or independent research into the prevalence or incidence of gambling harm at Perth Casino.
No. I won't elaborate on what I've said, but generally it's sort of self-evident that there's this innate tension in that industry. It's a bit like the cigarette thing in a sense. It's by nature a potentially very harmful product, but it's legal. And the tension in the regulation is between taking reasonable measures to provide some support, remediation for people who develop a gambling addiction, and not to overly stymie, if you like, the economic enterprise of a casino. And it's a very difficult, I would add, that was probably in Commission members' minds most of the time we dealt with casino business.
Right, and...
Was in mine. I can't speak for the others.
Thank you. And to add on, you've described support that might be provided to people with gambling problems. Mm. And another way that tension is balanced or rectified is by way of particular policies in relation to, for example, gaming machines, yes. The number of gaming machines,
yeah,
rate of play, that type of thing.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, you were asked about your understanding of the Problem Gambling Support Services Committee in your statement.
Yes.
you refer, I don't think you asked specifically about it, but you refer to it at paragraph 38 and you say that the GWC was responsible for funding this committee.
Mm-hmm.
But you don't know how the committee actually applied those funds.
No, I'd assume it was to do with assisting people with counselling, perhaps running some sort of low-level advertising campaigns about gambling, that sort of thing.
Right.
I'm only surmising that.
And so that falls, the PGSC falls into the side of support that you've referred to in relation to supporting people who do have gambling problems.
It would, yes.
Yeah. And another way that side of things is taken care of is through Crown Perth having its own responsible gambling procedures.
Yes.
And you say also, so when you say, just to wrap up the point about the PGSC, you say that you weren't aware of how the funds were applied, and you said you have a general understanding of what the committee did, but you don't specifically know about you don't specifically know what services the committee provided.
No, and I don't recall in any annual reports there being a breakdown.
Right. And the PGSC reported to the GWC by way of annual report?
I'm not sure.
In any event, though, that committee didn't regularly report to the GWC?
No, it didn't.
Right. Thank you. At paragraph 43 of your statement, you say that the GWC periodically receives statistics regarding Crown's responsible service of gambling program.
Yes.
I just want to take you to the meeting of the GWC the minutes of the meeting at the GWC where it was resolved to ask Crown Perth for those statistics. This is GWC.0002.0016.0251 at page 4. And it's agenda item 5.3, and if I can get the operator just to scroll down, so that's in the centre of the page, thank you. And you'll see that it was resolved to request regular reports on RSG statistics in relation to third-party referrals and the outcome of those referrals and referrals from Crown Casino employees.
Yes.
And you understand this to be the first time that GWC requested statistics of this kind from Crown Perth.
In that degree of detail, yes. I mean, all it had before was some general figures for every monthly meeting on various aspects of behaviour at the casino, but this was the first concerted effort to get these sort of statistics, yes.
Right. So is it then fair to say that in respect of any policy decisions that the GWC made prior to December 2017, Crown Perth's responsible gambling statistics were not taken into account? No. Well, no, they weren't provided, no. But we knew the service was there and we knew what it consisted of, but we didn't request, until that point, systematically request statistics. Right, and by extension then they weren't taken into account in the GWC's decision making? Well, I couldn't make that extension because I think that, the actual statistics themselves as data probably weren't, but the concept of gambling being harmful to people was always taken into consideration. Right. Well, at least by me anyway. And you say that also in paragraph 43 that you recall the GWC interrogated the report when it was provided. Mm-hmm. Can you describe to the Commission, please, what that interrogation involved? It would be things like what processes did you undergo to
reach people who may be experiencing harm. We interrogated them about the staff training which they did. Every person, certainly every person who worked on the floor, was to be trained in how to perhaps identify people who were gambling recklessly, and also to suggest things they might do or things they might say to try and get them to consider what they were doing. I do recall seeing some detail of that at some stage, where how they suggested to their staff, look, these are some of the things you can do if you're concerned that someone is really losing it. These are the signs that you can recognise, obviously things like anger and sort of, demeanour in general. So we interrogated them on that, I think. Also tried to get some idea of the statistics provide some ideas of the number self-excluding or excluding on the basis of family or coming forward for counselling. And we asked what they did, and they told us their sort of duties and how they tried to run this to the best of their ability, and that was about the interrogation, I think.
And in relation to the statistics provided, understood as a data set, was there any attempt by the GWC to identify trends, say year on year or month on month, in relation to third-party exclusions?
I think once that set of data, once those data started, the intention would have been to have comparative figures over time, yes.
Right, that was the intention, but do you recall that trend analysis actually being undertaken by the board?
No, and I don't know how often we requested the figures, whether it was, monthly would have been too frequent, I think, to draw any conclusions. So I'm trying to recall, and I can't recall whether we did do that and state an interval, 6 monthly or what. I'm sorry, I really can't remember.
It's okay. And is it right to say that the provision of Crown Perth RSG statistics did not lead to any formulation or implementation of particular policies by the GWC?
I think that would be correct. I think it was seen as something that could assist people. And that had to be there and that was necessary, but I think beyond that, that's about it.
Thank you. Now, if we could please get up the minutes of that December 2017 meeting again, please. It's GWC.0002.0016.0251. And you'll see there, Mr. Duckworth, it's recorded in the minutes that members discuss the availability of studies regarding the impact gaming machine and game design might have on gambling addiction.
Oh, yes. Yep.
See that? Do you recall anything about that particular discussion?
Not in detail. I know one of my fellow commissioners was very fired up about this issue, and I can imagine that he would have initiated that discussion.
Right, and the second sentence there says the DDGR, who at that time was Mr. Connolly,
yes,
indicated that the gaming machine national standard contained provisions prohibiting design elements that may contribute to problem gambling.
I see that, yes.
Right, so do you recall anything about what Mr. Connolly said at that meeting in respect of the national standard and how that was sufficient in relation to prohibiting design elements of EGMs that might contribute to problem gambling?
I'm assuming that Mr. Connolly was talking about the time limitation, or the time it takes to play those games, and also that it wasn't they weren't to look like poker machines. That's all I can imagine he was referring to there.
Right, and as at December 2017, you refer to it as the time limitation. It's also known as the rate of play.
Rate of play,
There's
yes,
a 5-second minimum as at December 2017.
Yeah.
And so, just to clarify, do you have an active recollection of Mr. Connolly pointing to that feature of the standard as an element that would prevent the contribution to problem gambling?
I'm almost certain it would have been, but to be, perfectly honest, I don't have 100% active recollection. Okay. I can't.
Thank you. And so, ultimately, you can tell by, am I right in thinking, by reference to the resolution, that there was no decision made in respect of obtaining studies or literature from outside sources by members of the GWC at this meeting?
You're correct, yes. I think it was just in relation to regular supply of data.
Thank you. Now, just by way of illustration, I'd like to get up a document that was prepared by solicitors assisting the Royal Commission, which is an aid memoir which summarises some of the literature that was available at the time this discussion was being had in relation to EGMs. So if I could get up PCRC.0007.0003.0001, and if we could go to and just by way of explanation, this table contains a summary of the literature that was presented to the Responsible Gaming Committee of Crown Resorts Limited.
Right.
Were you aware that Crown Resorts Limited at group level had a Responsible Gaming Committee?
At group level, no, but I see it as entirely likely that they did, yes.
Right.
But I wasn't aware of that particular committee.
Right. And just to give you some example of the literature that was available in relation to EGMs at this time, could we go to page 3, please? And zoom in at page 2. And pause it there. And you can see the 4th line item on the 25th of September 2015. There's an article, so some research entitled Veiled EGM Jackpots, the Effects of Hidden and Mystery Jackpots on Gambling Intensity.
Yes.
And then if we scroll down, the next line item, 12 November 2015, it's a title, Consumer Perspectives on Gambling Harm Minimisation Measures in an Australian Jurisdiction.
Mm-hmm.
And if we go to the next page, 9 August 2016.
Yep.
And you'll see there that the title of the research is Jackpot Structural Features, Rollover Effect and Goal Gradient Effect in EGM Gambling.
Yes.
And I'll just point you to 2 more studies prior to December 2017. If we go to the next page, one more page, sorry, I've got my page numbers mixed up, to 24 July 2017. Yeah, sorry, keep going. There we go.
Yep, got it. Yep.
Thank you, operator. And it says a meta-regression analysis of 41 Australian problem gambling prevalence estimates and their relationship to total spending on EGMs.
Yeah.
And the summary of that literature says that the research suggests there's a correlation between EGM losses and problem gambling prevalence.
Mm.
And then the next entry, the last one that I'll draw your attention to, is 24 July 2017, the effect of losses disguised as wins and near misses in EGM, a systematic review.
Yeah.
Right, so then you would agree, based on the presentation of this research in this aid memoir, that there was no shortage of studies available
No,
in
that's
respect
right.
of that matter that caught the board's attention in December 2017.
Yep.
And am I right in thinking that the board, and it's the case that the board was able to, it was within the board's power to request departmental support in relation to obtaining research of this kind?
It would have been, yes, for sure.
And is it the case that if the board had regard to some of these studies, it might have assisted them in guiding them, firstly, what statistical information it might need from Crown Perth?
Yes, but I go back to the difficult point I made before, that is if we'd got this information, then, and it showed from a multitude of aspects that confirmed our lay knowledge that gaming can be very harmful to a lot of people, and particularly EGMs have addictive features. I suspect the question of what does one then do? I mean, you could brainstorm a whole series of things, the equivalent of, gory pictures of body parts on cigarettes. You could have gory pictures of desperate people, or, bank managers sort of seizing the house or whatever it was. I'm not being flippant, I'm just playing out here. There's a number of things. I suspect, this is just me speculating, that if you were really going to make a quantum difference to the amount of harm that casinos intrinsically cause people, you would need a decision from the state government which said, well, we are reassessing gaming in WA, gambling. The costs of damage outweigh, or whatever. They wouldn't outweigh what they take, but I don't think the Commission, and for all its sins, all its faults, I don't think the Commission would have been able to implement a strong, forceful policy regarding EGMs and warning people and minimising harm, unless it was something which the government of the day thought should be done.
Right. Now, I just want to challenge that, Mr. Duckworth, because one of the things that the GWC did have control over were particular policies in relation to EGMs. Do you accept that?
Yes, I do, yeah.
And the effect of those policies was at times to either minimise harm or to increase harm, depending on what those policies were, correct?
Yeah, it could be, yeah.
So in terms of it being a state government responsibility versus a commission responsibility, you accept that the commission did have a responsibility to minimise harm in relation to the policies that it did have control over in relation to EGMs?
Yes, I do.
Okay, thank you. I just want to get to some policy changes. The first one is of this particular kind, and the first one is in relation to the increase in EGMs that occurred in 2012.
Yeah.
So you recall that in 2012, Crown submitted a proposal to increase the number of EGMs on the Crown Casino floor by 500.
Yes, I'm sure that was right.
And what I want to do is to go to the minutes of the November 2012 meeting which was the meeting at which this decision was made. GWC.0002.0016.0082 at page 4. And this is under agenda item 4.2.
Yeah.
you'll see increase in electronic gaming machines and gaming tables at Crown Perth.
Yeah.
And it appears that there was a lengthy consideration of this proposed change to policy. And in ultimately agreeing to the increase, the Commission has had regard to some matters which form the subject of bullet points. Do you
Yes.
see that?
Yeah.
And there are two of those which caught my attention. The first is the Chairman's Memorandum on the proposed development submitted to the August 2012 meeting of the Commission, which I'll come to. And the fifth one, which is Western Australia having a low rate in the prevalence of problem gambling by virtue of maintaining a single destination for casino-style gaming.
Yeah.
A significant factor recognised by the Productivity Commission in retaining a low prevalence of problem gambling.
Yes.
And that's actually an understanding that you have, at least in part, echoed today as your
Yes.
high-level understanding
Yeah.
of the prevalence of gambling in Western Australia. Now, before I go on, do you recall anything, I know it was a long time ago, so it might not jog any memories for you, but do you recall anything in particular about the meeting in November 2012 in this discussion?
No, I don't. I'm looking at those points there, and but beyond those, no.
Thank you. Can we please bring up the memorandum which is referred to in bullet point 1, which is GWC.0002.0016.0069 at page 26. Okay, we have another technical issue, unfortunately. Oh, there we go.
Okay.
'26. Hang on. That's the wrong document. It's 0069, not 82. GWC.0002.0016.0069. Still, I think this is a result of this technical difficulty that we're having. Yep, we've got the right doc now, thank you. 26, please. Right, and you might recognise this as the Chairman's Memorandum.
Yes.
And if we could scroll through, and the Chairman has attached some documents which he considers relevant to the contemplation of this proposed policy change, correct?
Well, I'm just looking at his memorandum at the moment.
Sure, take your time. The material part to the question that I'm about to ask you is in fact on the next page, so
Right, okay.
I'm not trying to hurry you along, Mr. Duckworth, but I won't be asking you about the particular decisions or anything like that.
Okay, I can go to the next page.
Right, can we please go to the next page? And it says, at attachment 7 is a copy of a memorandum regarding Western Australia's prevalence of problem gambling, reported by the Productivity Commission in 1999 as being 0.17% vis-a-vis the Dickerson method, or 0.70% using the SOGS 5+ method of the adult population. And then there's a reference to the 1994 survey, recording a rate of prevalence of 0.32% for Western Australia. And those are the only surveys conducted in Western Australia. You see that?
Yes.
Now, if you recall the conclusion that was drawn by the GWC in the minutes in relation to West Australia's low prevalence of problem gambling, do you accept that this conclusion was based on data from 1999?
Yes, it looks that way. Yeah.
And do you also accept that in the course of approving this increase, there was no independent interrogation of how an increase in EGMs at the casino might increase the prevalence of harm to gamblers in Western Australia?
That's true. But,
and there was also no consideration of the implementation of additional harm minimisation measures to mitigate any possible harm caused by that increase.
I can't remember if that was the case. As I say, there would have been, I'm almost certain there would have been discussion, whether minuted or not, on the potential harm.
Right.
Having said that, I go back to that sort of tension formula I spoke about. There was always the question of Crown Perth, or Buzzard as it was then, in comparison with other casinos in terms of prevalence or numbers of these sorts of machines, and
Right.
was it out of the ordinary or was it not out of the ordinary? That would have been a consideration.
Right, and I understand in accepting though that there was no independent interrogation of how this increase might affect problem gambling in WA.
No, there wasn't.
Do you then accept that the board didn't adequately take into account harm minimisation during the approval of this policy change?
Well, I don't know. It depends whether you think an addition of a certain number of these machines in itself is a factor which would lead to a greater amount of harm.
But that's not a matter about which the board... Okay.
Sorry.
Have you finished your answer, Mr. Duckworth?
Yeah, let me think about that. It would be very difficult to tie, to correlate degree of harm to number of machines. I don't know whether any research has done that or shows that. If there were research put in front of the Commission which said, look, for every extra 100 machines, the incidence of damage increases by X% in a given adult population, that would give you something to go on, but was sort of guessing a bit, I suppose. That's not to say that the proposition is wrong. It's that we didn't have anything really solid to go on. And as I say, the other tension is, look, all these other places have got lots of do increase their machines from time to time, should I say.
And in circumstances where the GWC was statutorily required to take into account harm minimisation in implementing policy, do you consider that guesswork aspect of implementing this policy to be an adequate consideration?
I think I was saying it would be guesswork, that it's always, sorry, I don't know whether I made myself clear, that quoting numbers of machines and incidents of harm, there's nothing reliable to go on.
Right, and the board didn't seek to inform itself of any independent research that might have assisted them in relation to working out what the harm caused by the increase might have been?
No, it didn't, no.
Okay, I just want to go to a different policy, the increase in the rate of play. Now, you were on the GWC at the time the GWC adopted the formal policy as to EGMs in 2011.
2011, yes, that's right.
Right, and do you recall that that policy was based in part on a departmental paper.
I don't recall that, but I do recall the 6 seconds. Yeah.
The 5.
Is
Sorry, we can come to the minimum second requirement, but I think you'll find, Mr. Duckworth, that originally it was a 5-second minimum rate of play,
Oh, okay.
not 6.
Yeah.
But that's okay. I'm not trying to trip you up.
No, I'm
just
sure
for
you're
the
not.
purpose
No.
of the transcript.
No.
Now, do you recall the rationale behind why the 5-second minimum was adopted at the time the EGM policy was adopted in 2011?
I think only in a comparative sense, that it was the games were longer than those played in other states, and that obviously the fewer games played, the less money being put in the machine or whatever.
And was there any consideration of... Sorry, I interrupted.
No, that's right.
Finish, sorry.
Sure, yeah.
Was there any consideration of the rate of play and how it might relate to the addictiveness of the particular machine?
Well, only that given these machines were part of the casino and legally sanctioned, some sort of figure was required, and it was, I think, thought that 5 was at least better than the 3 or whatever it was in other places. So it was a pragmatic decision, you might say.
So you understood at the time of implementing the policy in 2011 that it was a distinguishing feature of EGMs as compared to poker machines, that the minimum speed of play was 5 seconds.
Yes.
And did you understand at the time that to be a harm minimisation strategy?
Well, it was a help. Yes. Yes, you could say so.
And do you recall at the time of implementing the policy that decision as to rate of play was tied in any way to in-game features or bonus features in EGMs?
I don't. What I think occurred over the intervening years that more and more of these additional features seem to become part of the scene.
Right. But you were aware in 2011 that there were EGMs in existence that already had in-game features and bonus features.
I haven't thought about it, but I'm sure that would have been the case, yes.
And you're involved in their approval during the course of your time?
Yes.
And as at 2011?
Yes.
Right, so I just want to fast forward to 2014. You say at paragraph 50 of your statement that you don't have any independent recollection of the consideration to increasing the minimum speed of play to 6 seconds in 2014.
No, that's right, yeah.
Right. So I just want to try, if I can, to refresh your memory by reference to some minutes. If I could go to gwc.0002. This one's not in the book. Okay. Right. So I'll put that to one side. Based on your understanding of speed of play as a harm minimisation strategy, could it have been the case that in 2014 the GWC was considering it as part of a way to increase harm minimisation at the casino?
Sorry, to increase harm minimum. Yes, it could have been, yes.
But you don't have any independent recollection?
No, only the general proposition that, that obviously the longer the rate of play, the less people would spend and the less harmful it would be.
Right. And in 2014, you're aware that EGMs at Crown Perth had in-game features?
Thinking of it, yes.
And you were also involved in approving those EGMs as at 2014 during the course of your responsibilities on the board?
Yep.
Right. If we can fast forward to 2016, when the GWC adopted the WA appendix to the national standard, If we could go, not in the book. Okay. I will put it to you and ask you to accept that in 2016, when the GWC accepted the national standard, that the 5-second speed of play was retained from the 2011 EGM policy.
Yes.
And do you recall in 2016 when the GWC approved the WA appendix for the first time, any independent discussion about rate of play?
No, I don't recall that. No.
But by virtue of accepting this particular feature of EGMs in Perth, you would accept that there was the understanding as to the way that rate of play related to harm minimisation was accepted at that time.
Yes.
And you may not recall because it was 5 years ago, but do you recall any discussion about in-game features or bonus features at the time of approving the WA appendix in 2016?
No, not specifically.
And you're aware in 2016 that EGMs at Crown Perth had in-game features,
Yes.
and you were involved in 2016 in approving EGMs at Crown Perth with in-game features.
Yes.
Right. The next thing is the next part to this journey is 2018, which you might recall that there was the Victorian regulator VCGLR conducted a review into Crown Melbourne, which reported in 2018.
Yeah, where is it in my...
In your statement, I think... I don't know if you refer to it.
Oh.
I think you might refer to it in relation to something else.
Okay.
But hopefully this is in the book. Great. So that I can show you something on the screen that might assist you.
All right, good.
You might recall that the VCGLR made 20 recommendations in relation to Crown Melbourne.
What year, sorry, was it?
2018.
2018, okay. Yeah.
And some of those recommendations were in respect of the responsible service of gambling.
Yeah.
Do you recall that?
Vaguely, yes.
Yes. If we could bring up GWC.0002.0016.0260 and at page 14, please. This is part of the board pack that you received in advance of the December 2018 meeting. And Crown was asked to make a submission and present as to why or how the VCGLR's recommendations may or may not apply to Crown Perth. Do you recall that?
I think so. I mean, if I see more of this, I probably will.
If we could just scroll down so that the text of the first page is visible to Mr. Duckworth. And stop there, please, operator. Thank you. You'll see that Crown Perth's been asked to provide a submission in relation to the applicability of the RSG-related recommendations to Crown Perth.
Yes, yes,
and
I
that
see.
this is that submission.
Yeah.
And you'll see that in the third paragraph it says, it is our respectful view that Crown Perth's RSG framework is industry leading across all gambling services. And it then goes on to say the key aspects of the RSG framework and our casino operations environment which collectively distinguish Crown Perth from our other gambling operators include.
Yep.
So you may not have an active recollection of reading this, but do you agree that this is setting up a way for Crown Perth to distinguish its RSG environment specifically from Crown Melbourne and other jurisdictions?
Well, Mr. Preston seems to be suggesting that it's superior. Well, not knowing much about the Melbourne casino, I couldn't comment, but Mr. Preston was always very enthusiastic about Crown's achievements, for sure.
Can I put it to you, perhaps, Mr. Duckworth, that Crown Perth was suggesting that it didn't need to implement any of the recommendations made by the VCGLR because it had a distinguishable RSG framework?
That's a plausible explanation, yes.
Right. And the paper, I want you to take it from me that the paper then goes on to highlight some of the ways in which Crown Perth says its operating environment is different from other jurisdictions. And I just want to take you to a particular point in the paper, page 29. And I just, at the bottom of the page, want you to please make note of the section heading, which is Other Harm Minimisation Strategies. Do you see that?
Yes, I see that.
And if the operator could please go on to page 31. And you'll see here at the top of the page of page 31, there is a reference to speed of play.
Yes.
And so it says, the Commission has determined that the speed of play on EGMs operating at Crown Perth shall exceed 5 seconds, in contrast to other Australian jurisdictions.
Yes.
And you would agree that Crown Perth is pointing to this as an other harm minimisation strategy.
Yes.
To distinguish itself from other Australian jurisdictions.
Yep.
Right. And there was also a presentation made by Mr. Preston. Do you recall at the December 2018 meeting, do you recall anything about that?
In relation to harm minimisation?
Yes.
Yes, but not in any detail.
Okay. Now, just to recap the journey that we've been on, and can you just indicate if you agree with me? Firstly, the EGM policy in 2011 was approved in part on the basis that the 5 second minimum rate of play was a harm minimisation strategy and was a point of distinction from other from poker machines.
Yes.
Secondly, in 2014, and this one's maybe a little bit hazy because we didn't have the document, but it's possible at least that the Commission that the Commission contemplated raising the speed from 5 to 6 seconds from 5 to 6 seconds as a harm minimisation strategy. And in 2016, the WA Appendix was approved by the Commission to include the 5 second minimum play speed.
Yes.
And that was included in part as a harm minimisation strategy.
Yes.
And then in 2018, in November, Crown Perth submitted a paper to the Commission in response to the VCGLR's review recommendations, which pointed to the 5 second rate of play as a harm minimisation strategy. And putting to one side 2014, because we don't have the documents in respect of that, there was no, to the best of your recollection, at each of those junctures, there was no discussion of how rate of play might have related to in-game features.
I can't categorically say that, but then I can't specifically remember anything either. Sorry to be.
That's okay.
But I'd rather be conservative in what I say. Yeah.
If you can't recall, that's perfectly okay.
Thanks.
Would you be able to agree with the proposition that whether or not an EGM had an in-game feature had not, to this point in 2018, affected the decision about whether or not WA would have a 5-second rate of play.
Yeah, that would be correct, yes.
Thank you. So then we come to March 2019 when the decision in respect of decreasing the rate of play to 3 seconds was made. And we can go to GWC.0002.0016.026.0268. And if we can go to page 81 and sorry. We can scroll down, please. Yes, at paragraph 5, it says, it's understood that the minimum speed of play requirement of 5 seconds was introduced at the time when EGMs predominantly operated as a base game only. However, over the time, the nature of EGM products has dramatically changed, resulting in the introduction of in-game features, such as elements as frequently occurring free games, jackpots, and or bonus features. And that the impact of the EGM product developments is such that currently the actual EGM game speed at Crown Perth is approximately 9.5 seconds. See that?
Yep.
Sorry, Ms. Longdocker, can we just identify what document that we're looking at?
Certainly. Sorry, Commissioner. It's the March, it's the Crown's submission in relation to changing the rate of play, which forms part of the March 2019 agenda pack.
Thank you. So this document you're looking at, Mr. Duckworth, it has been prepared by Crown Perth.
That's correct.
Right, thank you.
My apologies, Mr. Duckworth. I
Sorry.
was racing ahead without properly identifying the document. Just in respect of this paragraph, do you agree that it's an apparent change of position from December 2018 when Crown Perth relied on the 5-second rate of play as a relevant harm minimisation strategy?
Sorry, all I've got on my screen is the end of some dot points, then number 3.
I'm referring to numbered paragraph 5.
Yes, I see that.
Please take your time to familiarise yourself with it if you need to.
Yeah, they're basically saying that the 5-second game was based on a base game only, and that with all the add-ons it's now a 9.5. Yes, I see that.
Right, and do you identify this as a change of position from the December 2018 presentation by Crown, which pointed to 5 seconds, the 5-second rate of play, as a relevant harm minimisation strategy?
Well, from what I've got here, it doesn't say what they're going to do next. Not on my screen, anyway.
Okay.
Just says, accordingly, based on the above assessment of the currently regulated game speed, we expect that if the regulated EGM speed of play was reduced to the proposed minimum of 3 seconds. Yeah, I remember all that quite clearly, yeah.
And did it strike you at the time that this was a slightly different position to the one that they took in December 2018, which sought to distinguish themselves from other jurisdictions by virtue of its 5-second rate of play?
That comparison wasn't in my mind. There's a lot of discussion. Yes, a lot of discussion. I think in the end, the Commission took the view that if the average over a whole series of games, if the average was 5 seconds, taking into account inbuilt features and extras and so on, that would be reasonable. So it would still retain an overall average of 5 seconds per game.
Right, bringing it in, although that change would bring it in line with other jurisdictions.
I thought others were 3.
Correct.
Yeah, well, this says 3, but the point I'm making is, yes, there would be some games with 3, but over the whole gamut of games, if you like, some of which had a lot of extra features and so on, if you took the average duration of play of all those games, the proposition was put to us that the speed would be overall, for the average, would be 5 seconds.
Right, so by virtue of the number of EGM, so it was put, so just to be clear on your evidence, it was put to you by Crown that as a result of the number of EGMs on the Perth casino floor,
Well,
of which some had in-game features and some didn't, the average second
I
of
think
rate of play would be 5 seconds.
yeah, I think it was the mean that they would add up all the game speeds for each thing and then sort of take an average and they'd come out with 5.
Right.
So can I just make sure I understand that? You're talking about the ultimate approval given, or what was ultimately approved?
Yes.
And your understanding was that it was approved that there could be an average speed of play of 5 seconds,
Yep.
and that in order to achieve that, there could be some machines, some games which were 3 seconds.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that I wanted to make sure was your understanding that the average of 5 seconds was to be achieved in one machine or across all machines on the floor.
It would be across all machines. I mean, the way I took, don't precisely recall, the way it would be done is to sort of calculate the speed of play for each machine on the floor, say from 3 to 9 or whatever, and take an average of that speed of play, and that it must be 5. I think it was a mean rather than any other, the sort of median point. But I'm not sure of that. I think it was.
Thank you, Ms. Longdrop.
Thank you, Commissioner. Wasn't it the case, though, Mr. Duckworth, that the very, very vast majority of machines on the Perth casino floor had in-game features?
I think they did, yes, which would mean that they were longer than the,
Right. But for those games, the Commission approved a reduction in the rate of play to 3 seconds.
That's not as I understand it. I would have thought that the ones with the in-game features would still take longer to play. They would be the only ones that didn't have inbuilt features. It would be 3 seconds.
The only ones that didn't have inbuilt features.
Could be played in 3 seconds, I would imagine.
Right, but I think that there's been some confusion because games without inbuilt features, there is no delay in the next depression
No,
of the
they're
button.
quick, yeah.
Right.
Quicker.
So for those, my understanding of the approval was that for those machines which didn't have in-game features, the rate of play was to remain at 5 seconds. But for the games that did have in-game features, the rate of play was that GWC approved a reduction to 3 seconds to take into account the in-game features, delaying the depression of the button the next time.
Yeah,
Is that
you may be right. I apologise. I don't clearly remember, but I hope that it's what you suggested. Yeah.
Okay. Perhaps we can take a step back and just think about, and just if you can put yourself in that meeting in respect of when that approval was made. Was there any interrogation by the Commission as to the percentage of EGMs on the Crown Perth casino floor that did not have in-game features?
I don't recall. I think there would have been, but I actually don't recall, no.
And was there any interrogation as to how Crown Perth calculated the empirical data about average speed of play in EGMs with in-game features?
No, but no, there wasn't, no.
And was there any consideration of how approving this change would now bring at least some machines in Crown Perth in line with the rate of play of poker machines at Crown Melbourne?
I think there would have been, yes.
And was there any consideration of how speed of play in relation to those particular machines could no longer be relied upon as a distinguishing feature of EGMs as compared to poker machines?
I think they still retain the slight difference in appearance as mandated earlier, but yeah.
But speed of play could no longer be relied upon as a distinguishing feature?
No.
And was there any interrogation as to the resulting harm that might befall gamblers with an increased rate of play?
No, I think people just took comfort in the overall speed of 5 seconds, averaged.
And do you accept that approving this had the effect of diluting a long-held policy by the GWC which had previous in respect of speed of play?
With hindsight, I do, but at the time, and it was a long discussion, I thought overall it wouldn't make much difference if the average speed of play was 5 seconds.
And there was no independent research requested by the Commission in relation to how speed of play might affect the prevalence of problem gambling?
No, as there hadn't been before.
So in respect of this particular change, do you agree that, in respect of the GWC's approval of changing the minimum rate of play to from 3 to 5 seconds in 2019, that there was an inadequate consideration of harm minimisation?
Yes, we could have done more.
Thank you. No further questions from me, Commissioner.
Thank you, Ms Waldropper. Do any other council seek to examine?
Yes, I seek leave to cross-examine.
Thank you, Ms Seawood.
Thank you. Ms Duckworth, you may remember my name is Seawood and I act for the Department of Local Government,
Yes.
Sport and Cultural Industries. During the questions from Council Assisting, you were shown some correspondence between Michael Connolly of the department and Austrac.
Yes.
Had you seen those documents in the last few days before you gave evidence?
Yes.
So they'd been provided to you to review?
Yes.
When were they provided to you?
Well, within the last few days.
And so is it fair to say you only had time for a quick review of those documents?
I got the gist of them.
The operator could please bring up GWC.0019.0026.
And this is a document that should just be shown on the
Is that right?
hearing room screen?
Yes. So I don't have one. If someone tell me when it does show up.
Yes, it's there now.
Okay, thank you. So this is the email exchange you were taken to earlier.
Yes.
If we perhaps start at the bottom and do them in chronological order.
Yeah.
If the operator could move to page 3, please. So here we see the first email from the Austrac officer to Michael
Yes.
Connolly.
Yeah.
It provides an introduction. In the first paragraph, Austrac is currently undertaking a campaign to look at casino junkets.
Yeah.
Paragraph 2, we would appreciate if you are able to provide any document or advice that outlines the type of probity, due diligence and or ongoing oversight
Yes.
you have of casino junkets.
Yep.
Would you agree that what they're asking for in that paragraph is for Mr Connolly to explain what the GWC currently does?
Yes.
Yes, it doesn't make any assumption as to exactly what is done. It's asking a question. What do you do?
Yes, it is.
If I could ask the operator please to scroll up page 2, we can see it's just a follow-up email asking, we haven't had a response, please may we have one?
Yep.
Then if we scroll to page 1,
Okay.
halfway down the page, there's an email from Mr Connolly on Tuesday, 4th of April.
Yes.
Have that, thank you. And we can see Mr Connolly's initial response. In that first paragraph, he's asking for a written request due to some confidentiality and secrecy provisions. And then he goes on, however, to provide an overview of the current position in any event. And would you agree that in that second paragraph, you can see there that he's explaining that all the AML CTF audits, sorry, I withdraw that. In that paragraph, he explains that it's his understanding that the AML CTF audits are responsibility of AUSTRAC.
That's what he seems to be saying.
Yes. And that on there, his understanding, he cannot even ask to see suspect transaction or other financial reports.
Yeah, that's what he's saying.
Yes, and then he goes on in the third paragraph to explain what the department does currently do, including a range of audits in relation to junket play, but that these are focused on the integrity of the table game play.
Yes.
Verification of revenue.
Yeah.
He goes to then detail some of the difficulties for a state regulator to be able to get information, reliable and consistent information relating to junket players from countries such as China.
Yeah.
He then informs AUSTRAC the department does not have access to intelligent holdings of other agencies.
Okay, yeah.
And there is a reliance on border security.
Yes.
So would you agree there that in that email, Mr Connolly is making it clear that there is not a role that the department currently fulfils in relation to those matters?
That's what he's suggesting, yes.
Yes. If we get the operator to scroll up to the remainder of paragraph 1, you can see that there's a letter from AUSTRAC saying, please find attached the further correspondence on the AUSTRAC letterhead.
Yeah.
So if we can just take you to that letter now, it is gwc.004.0019.0027.
And this document also should only appear on the hearing room screens.
Thank you, Commissioner. Okay, I think you've got that letter up now.
Yep.
We can see it's from AUSTRAC to Mr Connolly and it's dated the 6th of April.
Yes.
In the letter, it refers to the previous email exchange that I've just taken you to. And paragraph 2, I'd like to draw your attention to. Here it explains, as indicated in AUSTRAC's email, AUSTRAC is currently undertaking a campaign to better understand, and then it details money laundering, terrorism financing.
Yeah.
The second sentence in that paragraph says, an important consideration is the nature and extent of the junket processes, oversight undertaken by the relevant state gaming regulators.
Yeah.
So would you agree that what this letter is showing is that AUSTRAC is asking, what do you do?
Yes.
It certainly doesn't state that they consider that the state regulator does have a role. They rather are asking, what do you do, so that they can understand what you do.
Yes, yes.
Okay. If I can now take you to the response, the formal response that Mr Connolly sent in response to that request. And for the operator, can you please have up document gwc.004.0019.0008. Again, I presume this is not for the general screen. Is that up on your screen now, Mr. Duckworth? You see it's a letter to the relevant AUSTRAC person.
Yep.
I'll get to the date, which is at the bottom. You can see that the letter starts with, I refer to your letter dated 6th of April, which is the letter I just took you to. Goes on then in the first page to give an overview of the relevant legislation underlying or underpinning the regulation of the casinos in Western Australia.
Yeah.
If I can then take you to paragraph, page 2. paragraph 3. No, sorry, I'll keep going down to. My apologies, I'm trying to do it on my laptop at the same time. If I can take you to paragraph 3. Sorry, withdraw that, page 3. And the first paragraph, first substantive paragraph on page 3, yes, thank you. After the wording in italics.
Yeah.
As a result of the submission, the Commission's resolution to remove the requirements to approve junket representatives and operators in February 2010, there are no due diligence processes for junket representatives, operators or players that are conducted by officers of the Commission. So you'd accept that what Mr Connolly is explaining is that there is currently no approval process that the Commission undertakes.
That's what he's saying, yes.
Yes. Now this is in 2017. That accords with your understanding, doesn't it?
Yes.
Yes. After the junket regulations were repealed in 2010, the GWC didn't have any approval processes that it undertook in relation to junkets.
No, it didn't.
And if I can take you down to the bottom of that page, the second last paragraph starts, the Commission is not a designated authority
Yeah.
under the AML-CTF legislation, and it does not have access to the financial transaction reports.
Yes, I see that.
So when it was put to you by Councillor Sisting that the exchange of correspondence between AUSTRAC and Mr Connolly was to the effect that AUSTRAC thought that the GWC had a role, would you accept that when you go through each of these documents, AUSTRAC could not have been under that misapprehension?
You mean given that the regulation of junkets was ceased in 2010?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, yeah, that's right.
And also that Mr Connolly had explained to AUSTRAC that this is the position in Western Australia.
Yes, he seems to have done that, yep.
Yes. Okay. To the best of your knowledge, was there ever any correspondence from AUSTRAC that was brought to your attention where AUSTRAC said, notwithstanding what you've told us, we think you are wrong?
No, well, there wasn't any correspondence to do with AUSTRAC brought to our attention.
If I could take you to one last document on this. It's GWC.004.0019.0012. I'm not sure if this is subject to a similar or non-publication order or not. No, it's not. I'm told it's not. Okay, so this document, was this one of the documents you were given prior to giving your evidence today that you had a look at? Or?
No, I don't think I've seen this one.
Okay, well, just so that I give you a chance to orientate yourself, it is an AUSTRAC document, information report. It's headed Casino Junkets Campaign, and the date is 14 July 2017. You see that on the first page?
Yeah.
Mr Duckworth, I don't think it's in dispute that this is the document that AUSTRAC produced after making inquiries that incled the ones you've been shown earlier.
It is the document that was
Yes,
produced.
that AUSTRAC produced.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank
That's
you.
right, isn't it?
Yes,
Everyone
thank you,
agrees with
Commissioner.
that?
Thank
yes,
you.
so after the exchange of correspondence, AUSTRAC, you can take it from me, completed their investigation, and this is the document they published
Right.
after they'd undertaken their investigation. And if I can take you down to page 3, there's a heading in the middle of the page numbered 3, Regulation of Junkets.
Yeah.
And the first heading, 3.1, is regulation under the AML-CTF Act. That's the Commonwealth Act.
Yeah.
If I can ask you to be scrolled down to the next page, page 4, we have a separate heading, state-based regulation.
Yeah.
And you can see again here, it explains that AUSTRAC engaged with all the regulators as a part of this campaign. And the purpose of these engagements was to understand, in the first bullet point, what regulatory oversight junkets are subject to at a state level.
Yes.
And then if you scroll down, if it can be scrolled down slightly, there's a table
Yeah.
where it sets out each state and different types of oversight, and then does a tick or cross in order to see what is done state by state.
Yes.
And when it comes to Western Australia, it is clear that AUSTRAC understands that Western Australia doesn't do each of the things that there's a cross, and it only does the thing where there's a tick.
Yeah.
And the item where there's a tick is review casinos' procedures for junket operations.
Yeah.
Otherwise, everything else there is a no.
Yeah.
And if I can just ask you to look at the second paragraph underneath that table.
Yes.
We can see there it's discussing, at present, the only activity undertaken by all state regulators is a review and approval of casinos' junket operation procedures.
Yeah.
That's the one item that there's a tick for Western Australia. Commission and rebate arrangements are also subject to broad regulatory oversight due primarily to these arrangements' implementations for calculation and collection of taxes. So it's dealing with that topic.
Yeah.
So my proposition to you, Mr. Duckworth, is when it was put to you by Council Assisting that AUSTRAC had been suggesting that the GWC did have a role, my suggestion is the documents don't actually say that. Having looked at these documents, do you accept that what AUSTRAC was doing was an investigation to inquire what the GWC and the department were doing in relation to the regulation of junkets?
Yeah, it certainly was doing that. Yes.
And nothing was ever brought to your attention to indicate that AUSTRAC took a different view and felt that the department or the GWC should be doing something different?
No.
Nothing was brought to his attention to that effect.
Yes, nothing was brought to his attention.
Nothing was brought to my attention, but nothing from AUSTRAC
ever came to your attention.
surfaced.
No.
So,
And the information that I took you to that Mr. Connolly provided to AUSTRAC was consistent with what the GWC was doing. That is, they had no role for junket operations at that point in time because of the repeal of the regulations.
that's correct.
Thank you. No further questions. Thank you.
That document can be taken off the screen, thank you. Any other council? Yes.
Commissioner, Ms. Wren, I seek leave to cross-examine on behalf of the Crown Group entities.
Yes. Thank you.
Mr. Duckworth, my name is Wren. I represent the Crown Group entities.
Who, sorry?
The Crown.
Crown.
Right.
I just had a few questions for you. Firstly, Council Assisting took you to a letter from Mr. Preston dated the 14th of November 2018. And if we could just get that back up again, operator, please. It's GWC.0002.0016.0260. I think the letter starts at page 14. Mr. Duckworth, I think you suggested to Council Assisting that Mr. Preston was indicating that the recommendations of the VCGLR from the 6th review didn't need to be considered with respect to Crown Perth.
Yeah.
May I just take you to a later page of the same letter, which is at page 33? Thank you, operator. And if we just scroll down a little bit, in the paragraph that commences sort of halfway down the page, it says the implementation of certain recommendations at Crown Melbourne, where relevant and considered appropriate, will be applied at Crown Perth. Mm-hmm. See that? And then, based on a preliminary review, we have summarised the various recommendations and the likely application to Crown Perth in the table below.
Yeah.
And if we look at the table, the first two recommendations, recommendation 14 and 13, which is to develop and implement a responsible gaming strategy.
Yeah.
And if you look at the Crown Perth application, it says a joint strategic plan applicable to Crown Perth and Crown Melbourne is being developed.
Yes.
And operator, if we can just go to the next page, page 34. And again, under recommendation 6, which was to increase the staff resources,
Yes.
the Crown Perth says that although the recommendation was only in relation to Crown Melbourne, Crown Perth took the opportunity to review its own resource levels, etc.
Yep.
And again, if you could just look to the other recommendations going further down that table.
Yep. Self-exclusion. Can you just hold it there? Okay, I was just looking at the self-exclusion, the plan to do research. Yeah, okay.
Thank you. And then, operator, if we can just go to the next page, page 35.
Yep.
Mr. Duckworth, would you accept that Crown Perth was considering and implementing the recommendations of the 6th review to the extent that they were considered appropriate for Crown Perth? Based
Yes,
on that?
I would accept that. Based on this document, I would accept that, yeah.
Thank you. Operator, could we bring another document up, please? It's GWC.0002.0016.281. Mr. Duckworth, this is the papers for the agenda item 5.3 for the GWC meeting on the, have I got the right one? 22nd of July 2019.
Yeah.
And it relates to the amendments to the WA appendix to the gaming machine standards that were made in 2019, which you discussed already in your evidence.
Yeah.
And you'll see that under background, there's a reference to attachment 1, which is Crown Perth's submission with respect to seeking those amendments.
Yeah, I see the reference, yeah.
If you could just go to operator to page 3. And this is the letter from Crown Perth.
Yeah.
And if we can just go to the next page, page 4, please, operator. Under item 3, cost of EGM development.
Yeah.
If you could just read that paragraph there.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and you'll see that Crown Perth is saying there that as a result of certain requirements of the that in WA that all EGMs must be custom built for the Perth market,
Yes.
and that these requirements are unique to WA and negatively impact Crown Perth. If you just go to the next dot point and read over that.
Yes, I remember this argument well. Yeah.
And Crown Perth there is saying that it's impossible to convert certain games that exist in other markets to a format that would be capable of approval in Western Australia.
Yeah.
And operator, if we can just go to page 5. And the second dot point. And there Crown Perth is saying that they experience a significant delay in access to new products.
Yes, I see that.
And then give an example, by way of an example, the proposed gaming machine Lightning Link, which was recently presented to the GWC, has been operating in other jurisdictions for over 3 years and has been one of the most successful and popular gaming machines in recent times. This letter made it clear that Crown Perth sought approval from the GWC for EGM games such as Lightning Link that had been converted from versions of EGM games operating in other Australian jurisdictions.
Yeah.
And do you agree that neither you or any of the other GWC members told Crown Perth that it was not acceptable for EGM games in the eastern states to be converted for use in WA?
Do I agree that we did tell them or
Didn't tell them.
I don't even remember the conversation, I'm afraid. No. I mean, I remember these points they're making. They made them on many occasions that they were disadvantaged because they had to have a specific type of machine and so on. But I can't recall specifically what you're asking me now.
Okay, thank you. No further questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? No? Mr. Duckworth, in relation to the Problem Gambling Support Services Committee, when you were a member of the GWC, did you understand it to be a subcommittee of the GWC or another sort of committee?
I thought it was a committee of which a representative of GWC was a member that would include people, I don't know, perhaps from academia and other places. It also, of course, was broader than just the casino.
So do I understand by that answer you didn't think that it was actually a subcommittee of the GWC? That is a committee that was created by the GWC and exercised powers on behalf of the GWC?
No, I didn't, no.
Thank you. Mr. Sadler.
Thank you, Commissioner. Can we start with some questions about the junket regulations? So can I please be brought up? GWC 002 0016 001 and the page reference is 0338. This is 2010 paper for the removal of the junket regulations.
Yeah.
Just tell the operator that the page was 0338, that big one. Could you just read that paragraph, the enactment of the Anti-Money Laundering and Counter-Terrorism Financing Act?
Yeah. Yes.
And then have you just have a skim of the dot points below?
Yeah. Yes, I've got that.
Did you understand those to be independent obligations of Crown?
They are obligations of Crown under the Act, yes.
And do they have those obligations notwithstanding what's in the casino manual?
Yes.
Take you to another page of that document. Sorry, it's just the bottom. So can we go to the very bottom of page 0345? That's perfect. Stop there. See at the very end of that last paragraph that says further Interpol?
The one that begins with the police are no longer,
correct.
yeah.
It'll just go over onto the other page slightly, that sentence.
Yes, I see that.
Do you recall that being a problem with the junket, your oversight of the junket?
I recall that being this information about the police no longer being really involved, or Interpol as being one of the reasons why it would have been very difficult for the GWC to carry on taking carriage of the scrutiny process.
And specifically with relation to the Interpol part of that, would any additional resources have resolved that issue?
I don't think so, no.
Thank you. Can we please go to a different topic now? Can we go to GWC 002 0016 0202? Let's get there. The relevant page is 13, underscore 0013. So just to orientate you, this is February 2017 and we're talking here about the gambling compliance review
Yes,
that was being undertaken by the Chief Casino Operator as a result of the Auditor General's inquiry in Victoria into the Victorian regulator.
yes.
And I think if you go to, it's going to say it's going to do an agenda. So I don't have the pinpoint for this, but if I can find it, it says it's going to do in relation to junket regulations. I think it might be, scroll down with me. It might be over the page where it says what the review is going to be into. Recommendation. Sorry, stop there.
The
Read it out. So the extract I'm chasing here will say that the DDG discussed a recent review of liquor and gambling compliance activities conducted by the Victorian Auditor General. The DDG advised that a review had commenced of the department's current compliance practices. The first area to be examined would be casino compliance and regulation. The DDG will provide the Commission with a report in April 2017 on the first stage of the review that will include activity relating to casino gaming, junket operations, and revenue and taxes. And it's just dawned on me why that's not access the minutes, not the agenda. So if I could just quickly bring up GWC 002 0016 0203, which is the minute to this agenda.
yes.
The pinpoint page for the operator is page 2, I believe. There we are.
Yep.
There we are. So you said there's junket regulations, final paragraph, junket operations, sorry.
Yes.
So you were in the context of discussing a relevant period, which was the China investigations in October 2016, and then the intervening period was through to October 2017, which this should fall in the middle of. Do you remember? Do you recall whether this junket operations compliance review was ever reported back to the Gaming and Wagering Commission?
No, it wasn't.
Do you recall, up until, say, ILGA, which is a nice demarcation spot split, do you remember the junket regulations ever being reviewed by the Gaming and Wagering Commission?
No.
How then did the Gaming and Wagering Commission adopt a wait-and-see approach towards junket regulations then?
Well, the ones sorry, I'm not with you. Which junket
Maybe your
regulation?
evidence earlier today was that the Gaming and Wagering Commission adopted a wait-and-see approach towards
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
junket operations.
Yeah.
how so if it's never been considered?
Well, there was this report was supposed to provide some kind of guidance on junket
Is
regulations.
this the only, to best of your recollection, is this the only mention of a review of junket operations
Yes.
on your period between 2010 and, say, the Ilga inquiry?
Yes, I think so.
Just the one last topic. Can I please have just quickly brought up, this is a Crown presentation to GWC 002 0016 0269, and the page reference is 16. This is about the amendment to the WA appendix.
Right.
It's changing topics now. And this presentation given to you. See the second bullet, it says historically EGM games operated at speed of play close to a minimum limit of 5 seconds as they incorporated no or limited unpaid game features, i.e. free game, jackpot or bonus features.
Yeah.
Did you have any reason to doubt that?
No.
Can I please just move, same topic, can I just bring up GWC 002 0016 0285, which is your minutes of meeting from the 23 July 2019 meeting where you approved the changes. The agenda item is 5.3 and the pinpoint should be on page 2.
5.3 or 5.2?
5.3.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, sorry, reduction in minimum gauge speed. Yeah.
That's what you recommended. I'm just going to show you one other document once you've just read your resolution 1.
Okay.
2019. And just
Yep, I've
specifically
got the
sort of
resolution,
speed.
yeah.
Yeah. So you got two different there. You got 3 seconds and then 5 seconds where it has in-game features.
Yeah.
Okay, can we just have a look? That's the last question. Can we look at GWC 002 0016 0281 underscore 0030, so page reference 30. And while that's coming up, this is the paper that's put to the GWC to make this, ultimately make this recommendation.
Yeah.
Nick. And this is a suggestion from, I believe, the department to the GWC about what the changes should be.
Yeah.
And if you look at speed of play there, you see it says shall exceed 3 seconds.
Yeah.
And there's no mention of in-game features.
No.
Can you tell the Commission what thoughts, or if you recall, what thoughts or what deliberations you had about ultimately changing from the recommendation of the department from 3 seconds for all games to only 3 seconds for games with in-game features?
Well, I think there was disquiet at the general idea of 3 seconds, and there needed to be something, some comeback from that, which would satisfy members of the group, and that was then that the average length of play for those games with extras should be, on average, at least 5. Or, well, they're longer than that, but that was the main. So this document here, I'm just trying to see.
So that's the recommendation from the department to the GWC about what the change to the appendix should be.
From the department, yes. So 3, it's 5. I can't quite tell from the document here. It's 5 crossed out.
Yes, that's correct. 5
All
from
right,
the start.
okay, sorry, I couldn't,
And
yeah,
there's no reference to in-game features.
that's better. Yeah, well, that wasn't acceptable in that simple form, for sure.
And can you think of why? What considerations went through your head? As
Well, there
GWC?
was the minimisation of harm by carte blanche, reducing all games to 3 seconds. And it was thought a reasonable compromise, I suppose, that if in general or on average over the floor, the average speed of game was at least 5 seconds.
No further questions from the Commissioner.
Mr Duckworth, just before we go, so I understood what your evidence was, but going back to the previous document that you were shown, which was the resolution of the GWC, that idea of an average or a mean speed of play of 5 seconds isn't referred to in there either, is it?
Well, apparently not, no, but that was the basis of the whole discussion.
So
that was
you
carried out.
understood that was, to put it another way, the previous document you were shown, which was the actual resolution, you would say that that resolution does not reflect what the decision of the GWC was.
Oh, I'd have to look at them.
All
Sorry,
right,
I'd have to look at them both
Well, we can
again.
go back to it because, Mr Sadler.
Yes, it's GWC 002 0016 0285 on the second page of that document, and it's agenda item 5.
So it's the bottom resolution.
Yeah. Yes. No, there's no reference to an average, just 3 for one and 5 for the ones with additions, yeah.
So what I suggested to you was that this resolution does not reflect your recollection of what the GWC decided in respect of this matter.
Well, in a sense, the outcome does, but the argument in reaching that outcome was all about an average speed of play.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but if I read that, I wouldn't think that the average of all machines on the floor of the casino had to have a minimum speed of play of 5 seconds. Are you reading it differently to how I would read it?
Well, initially it was said that the games that had several features and or jackpots were up to 9 or more seconds. So my understanding was that the average of those games and the games set at 3 seconds without those features would end up at 5.
Thank you, Mr Duckworth.
Thank you.
Mr Duckworth, your evidence today has concluded. Because not all the commissioners are here to hear your evidence, and they will review it, there is the possibility that they might have some further questions, so I won't discharge you from your summons, but my position would be, and I hope very much for you, that this does conclude your appearances before the Commission. There is just that possibility that we'll have to come back to.
Okay.
So thank you very much, Mr Duckworth, for your assistance.
Thank you.
And we will now adjourn until 2 p.m.
All rise.